Okay, 1, 2, ready. As I went down to Strichen toon, I heard a fair maid mourning. She was making sair complaint for a true love ne'er returning. Fare ye will ye Mormon braes, what oft times I've been cheery. Fare ye will ye Mormon braes, for it's there I lost my dearie. There's aye good fishing to the sea, as ever I've been taken. I'll cast my line and I'll try again, for I'm only aince forsaken. Fare ye will ye Mormon braes, for oft times I've been cheery. Fare ye will ye Mormon braes, for it's there I lost my dearie. So I'll go down to Strichen toon, where I was bred and born in, and there I'll find another sweet...
I reckon most of you have been in Drumorty.
Or more likely have driven through it.
Drumorty's real easy to find. Just take the B9093 out of Strichen,
Head in the direction of the Baca beyond,
and you canna miss it.
And even if you haven't been in Drumorty itself, you'll no doubt have passed through one of half a dozen similar towns, dotted around that hinterland set between Peterhead and Fraserburgh.
Towns like Achnagad,
Or New Deer.
or Mad,
Towns with a few shops.
including a grocer and a baker.
a butcher and a tailor.
And most importantly of all, a draper's.
For if you dinna hae a draper, then far would you get the lace for the curtains?
And if they didn't have lace for the curtains, how would the majority of women of Drumorty enjoy that favourite of pastimes?
Watching their
neighbours'
neighbours'
comings
comings
and
and
goings.
goings. For Drumorty, like a such sma toons, is populated with dozens of folk with an encyclopedic knowledge o' each other's affairs,
Drumorty also, of course, has a church.
Oh aye, the kirk.
for which I have had the proud distinction for many years of acting as session clerk, chosen for the post by the congregation.
Who were delighted to find somebody feel enough to talk it on.
It's fair to say that the church is the centre point of the village.
A citadel,
Where gossip can be gathered and exchanged on a regular basis.
Important to every resident of the town.
Aye, but more important for some than others, wouldn't you say?
I think it's important to everyone in the town.
Aye, but nobody's been part of a trilogy there, have they? A hatch, a match, and sadly, a dispatch. You see, I was christened in Drumorty Kirk, and 20 years later I stood there looking radiant, oh, my mother's words, nae mine, as I became Mistress William McKenty. Stood there in the sight of God, and even more importantly, in the sight of several very envious young quines who had set their cap at my Billy.
and then, 2 decades later, you were left standing by yourself, staring at a walnut coffin, the best that your man's copy burial money could buy. Left a widow at...
An early age. Still, at least I once had a man.
There once was a man in my life, James Macpherson. As handsome a young man as the town ever turned out. Jamie, that's what I like to call him. I met him within a few weeks of arriving in Drumorty, when I was a slip of a girl of 16. You see, our family moved here from Edinburgh when my father was appointed as headmaster
2 teachers and him.
of Drumorty School. Jamie was my first boyfriend.
Only boyfriend.
I was his fiancée.
Oh, aye.
We never actually got round to getting a ring or announcing it or anything. Jamie always liked to keep it as our little secret that I knew, and that was all that really mattered. And then one day, the 12th of October, in fact, circumstances dictated that Jamie had to go to Aberdeen, just for a short time, you understand, so that he could get a better job and provide a higher standard of living for us both.
Perhaps I should translate. Circumstances dictated means took Cal feet.
And Jamie had to go to Aberdeen. Can better be described as ran as fast as his stumpy wee legs would carry him.
I did think of following Jamie,
Oh, that would have been a pleasant surprise for him.
but it wasn't the done thing back then. Young girls, even those engaged, unofficially, didn't run away after men. My mother made that very clear, and being the quiet and sweet lady that she was, would have found it most difficult to cope with the gossip that my actions would have generated. So instead, I remained in Drumorty and waited.
And waited.
As the letters became less frequent, and in truth less fervent, I reluctantly began to conclude that Jamie wasn't coming back. That was close on 35 years ago, and yet I can still visualise him to this day, the thick black wavy hair and mischievous smile. I think that's why I was so taken by Bella Talker's young lad. The first time I saw him, just for a split second, I thought it was Jamie, that he had come back at last. Of course, it wasn't him. Bella's lad was barely 20, and Jamie would have been in his 50s by now. But just for a second.
Bella Talker. Oh, she fair brightened up our lives for a while.
I dinna think brightened is the right word.
You speak for yourself.
Bella was a sweet young lass.
Who worked at Skilly's Fairham.
And had nothing in her head but lads.
Worked on the Fairham for a pittance.
Doing a' the menial tasks that all skinflin Skilly didn't want to do himself.
The first time I saw Bella and her lad together was on a warm June Sunday, when I decided to take a walk down by the burn before heading home for my dinner. There they were, just sitting, enjoying the glow of each other's company. Now, I know that I should have walked on, but something stopped me in my tracks, and it was more than just his likeness to my Jamie. I think I must have seen something of myself in Bella. Oh, she was bonnier than I ever was, even when I was young. And yet...
Now you've probably been told that there are 10 commandments.
Nae in Drumorty there's nae.
You see, alongside the better known ones like nae stealing or committing adultery, is our ain 11th commandment. Thou shalt not sit in someone else's seat on a Sunday morning. For we a' have our ain place in the kirk, and may the good Lord have mercy on ony one who dares to sit in it. Now it may sound petty, but it's nae. You see, it's a fail-safe way of finding out if there are ony strangers in the kirk.
And, just as importantly, instantly showing up anybody that hasn't turned up.
Without a valid excuse.
Aye, like being ill.
Aye, seriously ill.
Oh, aye. Nae just a caul or the flu. That doesn't count.
I remember hiding in the woods, anxious not to disturb Bella and her lad, and watched and listened. Listened to all the nonsense that passes as conversation in the first flush of youth. Eventually, the lad took his leave, but not before a rather passionate kiss was exchanged. As I headed home, I was lost in my reverie. Now, when the following Sunday came around, I decided to miss out in the church and go back and see how the romance was developing. Now, I knew that my absence amongst the faithful would cause a bit of a commotion, but truthfully, I didn't care.
That first Sunday that Miss McLean didn't turn up left me perplexed. I mean, I'd seen her the day afore and she looked perfectly weel to me. Well, a bit peaky, but then again, she aye was.
To give the church a miss one Sunday might be described as brave. 2 in a row could be regarded as foolhardy. But I didn't care. I wanted to go back and see Bella and her lad one more time. I wasn't there to eavesdrop. In fact, I stood far enough back in the woods that I couldn't hear what they said to each other. It was just the joy of watching them that I desired. You see, they reminded me so much of me and Jamie all those years ago. At times, it felt as though I was watching our lives being replayed, as though they'd been captured in one of those newfangled movie machines. For by the burn had been where we would always go. Oh, we weren't the first or last to court there, but to me, it was our special place. I think Jamie probably felt that way too.
Now, I couldn't for the life of me understand why Miss McLean was missing for the kirk again. Well, she looked well enough on Wednesday at Mr. McNabb's funeral. Oh, she had a scarf tied round her throat, but surely that wasn't reason enough to keep her awa'. And I wasn't the only in perplexed by a long chalk. So, after a few of us had discussed at some length just what the matter was, I volunteered to go round that very day and find out. After all, it was my duty. And what happened to you the day?
I wasn't feeling awful well.
And just fit was wrong that kept you for the kirk?
A sore throat.
The same sore throat that kept you last Sunday as well?
Yes.
You seemed well enough on Wednesday at Mr. McNabb's funeral.
Yes, but it got worse.
I heard you were seen walking aside the burn this morning.
I went out for a breath of fresh air to see if that would help it.
How would fresh air help if you weren't feeling well? I reckon if you were well enough to do that, then you were well enough to gang to the kirk.
Well, I was afraid that I might start coughing and disturb the service.
I suppose so. Mind you, coughing might have helped keep some of us walking.
Oh, did you not enjoy the sermon?
Well, I suppose it was all right, just an hour long. Oh, but we're all kind of used to that by now with this new minister. Anyway, funny you gone to Grayson with your company.
Well, I'm sure I'll be there next Sunday.
Oh, I should certainly hope so. It's only a sore throat you've got.
As I said, I'm confident I'll be there.
I think it would be disrespectful to the minister if you were missing again, especially with him being new. Oh, the lad'll start and think that you didn't like his sermons.
Surely not.
If I was the minister, that is the conclusion I would reach.
I hate to be rude, but I would like to go and have a lie down now.
At 2:30 in the afternoon.
Aye, it'll help me to rest so that I can feel better and be in my proper place next week and not offend the new minister.
Aye, I suppose so. I'll let myself out.
And of course I did return to my usual seat in church the following Sunday. Not to appease the gossips, I must add, but because I was missing the solace and comfort I received from the minister's weekly sermons.
Now, the arrival of a new minister is aye a major event, and this was no exception, with most of the kirk members divided into two conflicting groups. On one hand, we had the selection committee, who had chosen the new minister and who were naturally delighted with their choice. The other, considerably more vocal group, comprised of those folk that hadna been invited to be part of the selection committee, but thought that they should have been, and who consequently wrote off the new man afore he even uttered the very first word of his very first sermon.
Fortunately, I was a member of neither faction, and tried to ignore the many and varied criticisms of the man that were being bandied around.
I've heard that you've concerns about the new minister, Mistress McKenty.
I certainly have that.
I'm surprised to hear that. I think he's an excellent choice.
Aye, you would. After all, you helped choose him.
So what are your concerns?
Well, he's Arthur.
Now, at this point, what she really wanted to say was new. You see, that's a complaint that's been raised against every incumbent of the post since the church was built. New ministers are to be distrusted because of their newness, until around 2 weeks before they retire, at which point they're to be shrouded with accolades. But in fact, what she actually said was,
He's Arthur Young.
Oh, he is. But I suspect that he'll grow out of it.
And he's an incomer.
To the best of my knowledge, and I've had the honour of being session clerk for more than a decade, as you ken. In all that time, we've never had a minister that was born in Drumorty.
Aye, I ken. But at least the last inn came frae Aberdeenshire.
True. But Macduff isn't that far away.
And he's Arthur religious.
now, I had always thought that would be an advantage in a minister, but it was clear that that was not a view that was shared by many of the congregation of Drumorty Church.
and his sermons ging on forever.
I find them uplifting.
It's all right, him nae haeing a wife for a family. But droning on and on when some folk have to get home to make their dinner. And it's nae right him nae haeing a wife.
That was unfortunate, I would admit. I've always felt that a minister needs a wife beside him.
Well, I'm sure there will be no shortage of volunteers to help the new minister overcome that particular problem.
You're right there. Every mother, fae miles around wi' an unmarried lass, will be shoving her in his direction.
And Mistress McKenty was certainly correct there. And right at the front of that particular queue was Mistress Forbes. When she was younger, Peggy Forbes was full of fun, a larger-than-life character. Sadly, the years took their toll, as for more than a decade, Peggy had conducted a one-woman crusade to find a husband for her only daughter, Mildred. Despite countless and regular setbacks, she had soldiered on remorselessly, safe in the knowledge that if she didn't succeed, she would never become a
granny. That's not a lot to ask for, is it? One wee grandchild. Somebody to take for a walk in a pram on a fine summer's day, or to sit in knit cardigans and booties and mitts for in the cold winter nights.
Everybody in Drumorty admired Mistress Forbes' resolve, but it hadn't been an easy task she'd inherited. If you were feeling particularly charitable, you might describe Mildred as plain. Now, many young girls who are devoid of conventional good looks make up for it with a winning personality. Sadly, Mildred didn't.
Now, I kent it wasna going to be easy to find Mildred a man. I've heard folks say that if there was a beauty contest in Drumorty and Mildred was the only contestant, she still wouldna win. So I started looking early, afore she turned 18 in fact, and I thought, if we're going to do it, then we better do it properly. So I got a notebook and wrote down all the eligible men in the toon. A book with 2 columns, one for positive attributes and one for negative. When we had completed an entry, we would add up all the pluses and then deduct all the minuses, and the one with the best score would be our first choice. Originally, the only men that got into the book were those that were good looking, had a job of reasonable prospects, and had a house of their own. Oh, but over the years, as one by one we saw the chaps being snapped up, we became less choosy. As a result, now they get into the book if they're single and hae a pulse, and there's no even that many of them. That's why the arrival of a new minister, an unmarried new minister, was like manna fae heaven, and I immediately snapped into action. I discovered that the chap was biding in Miss Clark's boarding house until the old minister had left the manse. So I thought the least I could do would to be to invite him over for his dinner on a Sunday. After all, he could prove to be Mildred's last chance of finding the man, and my last chance of being a granny. Oh, for goodness sake, Mildred, look at the state you're in. Just imagine if the minister had turned up early and seen you looking like that.
I dinna care.
Oh, dinna be so silly, lassie. Oh, how would anybody ever want to marry somebody looking like that?
I said I wanted to marry him anyway.
Why would you nae? He's a nice young chap.
I think he's a bit dreepy. And I'm nae sure I'd want to be a minister's wife.
Well, you've been turned down by every other profession known to mankind. A minister must be the only one you hanna tried. Oh, please try, for my sake.
Aye, all right.
Now, when he comes to the door, you answer it. Tell him that the dinner's nae quite ready, and ask him if he fancies a stroll round the garden with ye.
Ma, there's a gale force wind blowing.
Dinna exaggerate, it's just a bit breezy, that's a'. Anyway, you're a bit ower sturdy to blow away, you know.
Ma!
Oh, that'll be him now. On you go. On you go. And if he tries to hide your hand, just you let him.
No!
I'm only talking about hiding your hand. Now on you go.
Right, I'm gone. Dinner's nae quite ready yet. Want a walk round the garden? Right, on then.
To no one's surprise, he didna try and hide her hand. Still, she didna manage to fear him off, which was something, and he at least paid for his dinner. Now, I dinna ken when exactly he had last sat down to a proper meal. Probably sometime during the Boer War by the look of it. Oh, but he couldna half eat. 2 plates of soup, chicken with tatties and scurly, and 2 helpings of jam, roly-poly and custard. Oh, it was therefore nae surprise that he jumped at the chance of returning the following Sunday.
A minister is aye regarded as a good catch. Not financially, of course, but because of the prestige. So Peggy Forbes was not the only Drumorty mother who thought that her daughter would make the perfect minister's wife. On one hand, she had the advantage of being the first to provide the lad with Drumorty hospitality. On the other hand, she had one major drawback: Mildred. Still, she remained determined, and Sunday after Sunday a tall, thin form was seen going into the Forbes' house, only to emerge 2 hours later looking considerably less emaciated. The number of hens that pecked about in the Forbes' garden slowly reduced, and the sight of Mistress Forbes returning from the butcher's on a Saturday, laden down with parcels, became so routine that even Mistress Mackenty stopped commenting on it.
Over the course of those 2 months, the minister became like one of the family. So much so that he insisted that we no longer refer to him within the house as Reverend, but to call him Mr. Stephen instead. Oh, I felt that was a bit our familiar, but if that's what he wanted, then who was I to argue? Sadly, as a member of the family, he treated Mildred like a sister and nothing more. For echt wax, they had walked round and round the garden afore dinner every Sunday, and not once did he even try and talk her hand. I was left in a bit of a quandary. With the amount the minister ate, it was costing me a small fortune. But should I gie up now and waste all that money, or carry on a bit longer in the hope that he would fall in with your plans? I decided to gie it another 4 weeks and not a day longer. As it turned out, things resolved themselves long afore then.
Ma!
Oh, fit is it, Mildred? Did he make advances?
No!
That's a pity. So come on then, what's wrong?
He's attached!
Attached to fit?
No, it's nae a fit, it's a fa.
What you havering about, lassie?
He's attached to a girl Macduff. He's got a fancy.
Do you mean a fiancé?
Aye, een of them.
Well, how'd you ken?
Because they tell me. He said he wouldn't be coming for his dinner next week because he's gone to Macduff to see about wedding plans.
He'll mean a warden for he's conducting the ceremony.
No, see, that's what I thought for a start. So I asked him, far as it's getting married. And he said, me, my fancy, you could have knocked me down with a feather.
Aye, well, it would hate to be a fairly big feather.
Ma!
Sorry. Oh, it's just awful.
He might have said something.
Well, how could he? His moo's aye been stuffed with food that I bought. He said 4 chickens, 12 on a best steak, liver, kidneys, a dab of lemon sole, I dinna ken, 50 else. Oh, and that's nae mentioning the soups and the puddings, aye, double helpings.
That's stealing.
Guinness, Mildred. You're right. Taking food fae folk under false pretences, that is stealing. Well, if that's the kind of man he is, then I reckon this has been a lucky escape for us all.
Div you really?
Aye, div that. Now, let's get the book out again.
Oh, ma, nae the book.
Aye, the book. First, we've got to tag the name of Reverend Stephen out. And now, we've got to start a brand new entry.
Ah,
You ken Mistress McKenty dropped in by on Friday.
aye.
Well, she was bringing good news.
Mistress McKenty brought good news. That's a first.
Aye, right enough.
So, fit was the good news.
You ken Charlie Henderson that farms up at Hillside?
Aye, I ken him. He's married to Elsie.
That's the good news. Elsie's dead. We've got a new single man.
Oh, ma, Charlie Henderson's about 60.
Nonsense. Mistress McKenty told me he's only 58.
Oh, ma.
All right. I'll put down his age as an entry in the minus column. But we'll balance that with a plus for the fact that he's got his own house, his own farm, and from fit I'm dealt his own teeth.
Oh, ma. I'm nae in the mood for doing this today.
You're right. You've had a trying sort of day. We'll do it the morning.
Ma, Charlie Henderson, is he not just a bit blind?
Aye, just a boot. I'll put that down in the book as a plus.
Ma!
The minister returned to Drumorty with his wife in tow, a pleasant sort of lass, who was well received by most folk in the toon. And so in one fell swoop, the new minister had managed to overcome one of the main objections to his appointment. Criticisms like being young and new would take a little longer.
By then, although I had returned to occupying my regular Sunday seat in the church, I made a point of regularly checking on the current state of Bella Talker's courtship. Throughout that winter it seemed to be blossoming, but when spring arrived, the lads suddenly stopped coming. Oh, I felt heart sorry for the lass as she stood for hour after hour, staring down the road from Skilly's farm, waiting for his appearance, waiting in vain.
It wasna long afore word began to spread that he had left her and wasna coming back.
That he'd gone to Edinburgh.
Aye, or so he said. We've heard that enough afore, have we nae?
Eventually Bella realised that he wasn't returning.
And it was around about that time that Bella began to bloom. And we realised we had a proper scandal on our hands.
I canna bide lang. I've a lot of other folk to visit the day. I'm here to tell you about the meeting of the Kirk Elders last night.
Oh yes?
We reached a decision. A unanimous decision.
About what?
About fit should be done with Bella Talker.
But Bella's not a church member, is she?
No. But fit's that good to do with anything?
Well, why should the elders be discussing her?
Because of the shame she's brought to Drumorty.
Shame?
Did you nae ken that she's been seeing some young lad on the Sabbath every week?
Yes, I did.
And now he's a one left her. And left her expecting a bairn.
Yes, I know all that, but I still don't know what it has to do with the church elders.
Because it's their duty to uphold the morals of Drumorty. See that the toon isn't brought into disrepute by shameless hussies like her.
She's only a young lass when all's said and done.
And to see that God-fearing elders like poor Mr. Skilly dinna suffer humiliation and embarrassment.
Why should Mr. Skilly be embarrassed?
Because he provided food and shelter to that lassie.
I think it's fair to say that in return she worked rather hard.
Maybe so. It's just a pity she hadna kept her mind on her work a bit more, if you ask me.
So what did the elders decide?
They decided, unanimously,
Yes, you said.
that Mr. Skilly should sack her forthwith, and that she be telt to leave the toon, without delay.
Where will she go?
That's hardly our problem, is it?
Well, you can't just put her out in the streets, not in her condition.
She should have thought of that afore she got herself into that condition. Anyway, the decision is made. Skilly will ensure that she is off his property by 10 o'clock the morn's morning, and that's why I'm here.
I don't understand.
The first train to Aberdeen in the morning is at 9:30, and that's when she'll tack, nae doubt. Now, to get frae Skilly's Fairham to the station, she'll hae to walk the length of the High Street, won't she?
Yes, I suppose she will.
Well, the elders agreed that everyone who has a windy on the High Street should be looking out for her, and at the moment she passes their windy, their blinds should be pulled down. Forcefully.
Whatever for?
To show her in no uncertain terms that she's nae welcome in Drumorty. Just in case she should ever think of coming back.
I greatly doubt she'll ever think of doing that.
You never ken with that kind of folk. And that's why we'll hae discharged our civic duty. So you ken fit to do then?
Oh yes. Yes, I know well enough.
Good. Right, I'm off to see Mistress McWilliam next.
I decided to stay one step ahead of the rest of the town and pulled closed my blinds there and then and sat in the darkness, remembering back to the time when I had been the lass who'd been deserted. Oh, because I wasn't in Bella's condition, the good and compassionate people of Drumorty let me stay, although I was suitably chastised for my foolishness. As I cast my mind back those 30-odd years and wondered, if I could live that moment all over again, what would I do? There was a palpable air of excitement in Drumorty the following morning, as groups gathered on doorsteps to discuss the great event that lay ahead. And yet by 9 o'clock, the High Street was suddenly desolate, and all was hushed and still. Nothing stirred with the sole exception of the occasional merest flutter of lace curtains. And then Bella appeared. She wore a well-worn coat and clutched a brown canvas bundle, all her worldly possessions. She looked relieved not to be confronted by the righteous residents of Drumorty, and was headed in the direction of the station that would take her away to a new life, when the blinds on Mistress Macpherson's window were pulled down with real venom. The lassie jumped, but after taking stock of the situation, moved on. A second blind descended, then a third. By this point, the lassie's head had dropped and her slow walk had developed into a hurried scuttle. When the fourth blind dropped, I could stand it no longer. Bella, wait.
So, you've come to gloat at close quarters, have you?
No, lass.
So what do you want?
I would like to help you.
Me? The hussy that's brought shame to the toon.
You haven't, lass. Let me help you, please.
But why?
Because once, many years ago, I was like you. I wasn't expecting or anything like that, but I was scared and lonely, and I know back then I would have done anything for a kindly word. So come away into the house. I can show you the wee jacket I've been knitting for the baby.
My baby?
Well, it's hardly likely to be mine, is it? And I'll stick the kettle on.
But that's the point. I'll just hate to talk the afternoon train instead.
Oh, no, you don't need to catch any train. I've got a spare bedroom.
You mean stay? Will you?
Yes.
Me and the baby?
Yes.
But what'll folks say?
Oh, Bella, dear. It's a long time since I cared what any of them said. A very long time.
happened that last Whitsuntide I tired o' my place, and I get up to Imsh to feed my fortune for to chase, and sing Harry and sing Harry han. The orders were to bed at 6 and never leave the toon, for ilka time we left it we'd be find a half a croon, and sing Harry.
Although it was kind of Miss McLean to tuck me into her house, and somebody being kind to me in Drumorty wasn't something I was after used to, I was reluctant to bide in the toon. In truth, I wanted to go and find my lad, but I realised I couldn't, nae in my condition, nae carrying that bairn. And so, with nae other option, I bade.
My actions in providing shelter for Bella Talker were viewed with a mixture of amazement and suspicion, and for quite some time Bella and I were shunned as we walked down the street, and given the cold shoulder in most of the local shops. As Bella's date grew ever closer, she was less and less able to get out and about, and I was more than happy to stay at home and keep her company, delighted to have someone to speak to in the long dark winter nights. And then, as the first signs of spring emerged, Bella gave birth to a wee boy that she called Lawrence, and life for us both changed. I quickly realised that Bella was more than happy for me to take on jobs like changing nappies and washing his clothes, tasks that some women would describe as a chore, but were a joy to me. In truth, I felt like a mother to them both, and revelled in a role in life that I'd never believed would come my way.
I was more than glad that she wanted to look after the bairn. I hated being a mother. I felt trapped and wanted nothing more than to get away from that place and to look for my lad.
Bella dear, the big house of paper sewing bill, £3 10 shillings. Oh, my dear lamb, you'll not be sleeping in a clothes basket any longer. No, it's a cradle and pram for you. Good morning, Mr. Anderson. It's a bit of a surprise to see you here.
Oh, is it?
Well, you've been rather reluctant to visit these past few months. Since I've had a house guest, in fact.
Oh well, it's your guest I've come to see.
I'm afraid you've had a wasted journey.
No?
Yes, Bella's out.
I'll just come back another time then.
May I be so bold as to ask why?
I suppose since you're giving refuge to the lassie, you're entitled to ken. As an elder of the kirk, and of course, session clerk, it is my duty to speak with Bella Talker about her misbegotten bairn, and fa we may name as the father o' it.
And was it with that same godly duty that your fellow elder Mr. Skilly turned her out on the roadside to die?
Mr. Skilly had nae option. He couldna shelter a wanton and unrepentant woman. Mind you, things could change if she would just face the elders and make admission of her sins.
Her sins? It's not her sins that she's to repent. It's the evidence.
What?
That wee lamb, sleeping over there. There are people who sit on the elders' bench who sin far more than Bella ever did. But they don't get found out, do they? No, the silver that they place in the collection plate helps blind the minister.
I think you should be careful what you're saying, Mistress McLean.
Really?
What am I? I've said what I was asked to come and say. Please tell the lassie if she is contrite of heart, we'll make sure that her bairn finds a hame in the almshouse.
The baby has a home.
And tell her that Skilly is willing to take her back. Nae at the old price, of course, But he'll gie her half of what she was being paid afore.
Oh, that Skilly is a sainted and godlike man right enough, with a heart abundant in charity. It's so good of him to let her carry the swill to the pigs for half the price he'd pay anyone else.
Well, I've delivered the message. I'll take my leave o' ye.
Yes, just you do that, Mr. Anderson, and don't rush back. Take it you heard all that, Bella?
Now, I ken I'm nae much of a mother to the lad, and I'll admit I never wanted him in the first place. But you winna let them talk into the almshouse, will ye?
That wee lamb will leave this house over my dead body. Now, go and put the kettle on, lass, and make me a cup of tea, will you?
Aye. Miss McLean, thank you.
You're very welcome, lass. That little encounter was no doubt repeated round and round Drumorty for the next couple of weeks. But it did have one benefit. It kept that hypocrite Mr. Anderson from my door for some considerable time thereafter.
Aye. Miss McLean has aye been a dab-handed chasing the men awa fae her door. Though with some it took a bitty longer. 15 year in fact. You'll maybe mind a bitty earlier that Miss McLean telt us a she'd only ever had the one boyfriend.
That's true.
The een with the cauld feet. But what she conveniently forgot to mention was, though there never was another een, it wasna for the lack of trying. Aye, abody within 20 mile of Drumorty kent that Miss McLean had her cap firmly set on Jock Sclesser, the quarter up at Skilly's Ferrum. Jock would meet her outside her house every Sunday morning. Every Sunday for 15 year. Now, Aberdeen and Drumorty was waiting for Jock to propose, but the only problem was Jock Sclesser was a scutterer.
That's a bitty unfair, no?
15 year?
Well, there were important decisions to be made.
Like fat.
I had to decide how I was going to extend the house. I mean, I couldna take a wife into my wee quarter house. Nae without adding an extra room.
But you'd plenty space to do that.
Aye, but that was a problem, you see. I'd owe muckle space. So I couldna make up my mind for to do. Should I move a rowan tree and build on the east? Or should I move a peats and build on the west?
That was quite a problem, right enough.
It certainly was. And usually by the time I'd weighed up all the pros and cons, it was lambing season, and I was out busy.
And so another year went by.
Exactly.
And this time, Jessie McLean waited patiently, hoping that next Sunday would be the one, the whack he would finally ask her. And it is fair to say that I was the first person in Drumorty to ken when she finally gave up hope. Morning, Miss McLean.
Good morning, Mistress Mackenzie.
And what can I do for you the day?
I would like 2.5 yards of 4-inch black satin ribbon, please.
And would that be silk both sides?
Yes. Silk both sides, please.
And that's when I kent. You see, a satin-faced ribbon has mony purposes, but silk both sides is a bonnet string and nothing else. And when a lassie starts wearing a bonnet with ties rather than a hat, she's admitting that her youth is over and that she's gone to be an old maid.
I had waited long enough. 15 years. Meeting him at the gate every Sunday morning, feigning surprise that he was there, and every week looking to see if he'd a white daisy in his buttonhole. You see, No self-respecting man would ever turn up to propose without a daisy in his lapel. But not once in all those 15 years was he ever wearing a flower. Eventually, in frustration one week, I decided that I'd no option but to take the initiative, and was bold enough to suggest that your peats might be better sheltered in the lee of the byre. Sadly, I received only a curt
"No, they're better where they are."
in response, and that was it. There and then I decided that the time had come to accept that I was a spinster, and always would be.
You've no idea how often I picked a white gown, determined that this would be the day when I finally popped the question. But something held me back, and it wasn't just the decision about far to build. Important though that was, only why, for whatever a reason, week after week, without fail, I would leave a flower lying on the kitchen table until one day, and I will admit it did take me a good while. One day I said to myself, if you're ever going to get hitched, then you canna put it off any longer. So, with the gown prominently displayed, I set off for the kirk.
I had never worn a bonnet tied beneath the chin before, and it took a bit of getting used to. In fact, I was still adjusting it as I walked down the path to meet Mr. Sclesser. And there he was, waiting for me, as always. But this week, there was something different about him.
At first I couldn't quite think if it was different about her.
It took me a minute to realise what it was.
Then it struck me.
There was the white flower I'd been hoping to see all those years.
She was wearing a bonnet, and then tied underneath her chin. A sure sign of a confirmed old maid.
Oh, I thought about going back in the house and changing into my usual Sunday hat, but
I've had a recht feel with a gown in my lapel, and I thought of throwing it away.
I didn't want to make a fuss.
But I didn't want to make a fuss.
And I thought he might not notice.
And I thought she mightn't notice. Morning, Miss McLean.
Good morning, Mr. Sclesser. Pleasant day.
It's nae bad at that.
Oh, aren't these rowan trees beautiful?
Gay, Bonnie. I've been thinking of levelling my rowan tree, you can.
Oh, but it's a lovely tree.
I suppose it is.
It would be a shame to cut it down.
Maybe you're right. Maybe I shouldn't bother.
But if you've made up your mind to cut it down, then I suppose you'll have to.
I've no option if I'm going to the room to build.
Oh, are you thinking of building?
It has crossed my mind.
Oh, and cutting down the rowan tree would give you quite a bit of extra room on the east side of your house.
Oh, aye. It's a big brute of a tree. I'd have a lot more room with that going.
Oh, you certainly would. Plenty of room to build. And what exactly are you thinking of building?
A shed.
A shed? Whatever for?
For my peats.
But don't you store your peats on the other side of the house?
That's right, aye.
So you'd have to move them?
No, I'll leave them there and a'. A man can never hae too muckle storage for peats, you can.
Actually, I didn't know that. I don't think I'm feeling up to going to the church today. Please pass on my apologies to the minister.
Oh, that's a pity. Are you wanting me to walk you home?
No, Mr. Sclesser, I certainly am not. It was only later, when I took stock, that I realised I perhaps had somewhat of a lucky escape. I reckon he'd have been a bit of a trial, and I'd have spent my life just tidying up after him. I decided I'd made a life for myself as a spinster, and when I really thought about it, It was a life that suited me.
I didn't think I would have had the time to get married anyway. Now with the lambing coming up, and a tree to cut down.
Reckon you were destined to be a bachelor.
I reckon you're right. Ach, I'm real used to it anyway. But I will admit there's times it gets a bit lonely.
Well, dinna forget, there's I Mildred.
Nae that lonely.
I like to think that from that day on, I put behind my foolishness. Although there are people in Drumorty who wouldn't agree, and who certainly weren't adverse to making their feelings known. As the wee lad began to grow, the sight of Bella and I pushing the pram around town became a common sight. The animosity towards us seemed to intensify, rather than abate.
Hardly surprising. I mean, there she was, a supposedly God-fearing woman, giving shelter to an illegitimate bairn and the trollop that had borne him. Oh, the situation kept the mere gossipy women in Drumorty contented for a long time.
Oblivious to the gossip, the days passed by in a contented daze. And before I realised it, the wee lamb was 6 months old. Those 6 months must have been the happiest of my life. Sadly, the same couldn't be said for Bella, who had grown increasingly moody and morose, brooding over the lad that had left her. And then one morning, I came down into the parlour, and I instantly knew that something was wrong. Instead of being greeted by Bella, I was met with an empty room, and a letter propped up on the mantel shelf.
I am going to Edinburgh. I have taken £2 from the Toby jug. It is ill done of me, but I will not stay in Drumorty. If I get a place, I'll send back the money. You have been kinder to me than I deserve, and I will not forget.
I don't think I've ever felt quite so lonely. And I'll admit that I just sat in the big chair and wept, feeling very sorry for myself indeed. And then I heard a sound. At first I thought, no, it couldn't be. But it was. It was the sound of a baby crying. I rushed into the other room and there he was, lying in his cot. That's when I realised Bella was gone. She wouldn't be coming back, and the baby was mine. Mine to keep. But as I sat and nursed him in front of the fire, I suddenly thought of Bella and her pot. Bella stealing out loveless in the night, alone. Bella who had borne the suffering and the shame. And the great remorse for the greed of my own rejoicing came over me. And I said a silent prayer. Lord, be merciful to her and forgive me, a covetous sinner.
I wasna surprised when I heard that the tocher quine had run awa after a loon and left her bairn a hin. Oh, I kenned she was a baddeen. For a start, she was an incomer, and if I live by the maxim, never trust an incomer, and it seldom let me down. Oh, ungrateful madam, after a' that Miss McLean had done for her.
I don't know if she ever found her lad, because I never saw Bella again.
Or ever heard a word for her. You'd have thought the least she could do would be to send a note, and return the money we heard she'd stolen when she left. Mistress Macpherson told me that she had heard from Mistress Fraser that it was £10. Just proof of it I said about her.
For the first year after she ran away, I suffered many a sleepless night, convinced that one day she'd return to collect her wee lad.
fat chunts.
And on a few occasions I panicked when a knock came to the door unexpectedly. But as time went on, I began to sense that Bella wasn't coming back. My other main concern back then was that the wee boy would be taken to an orphanage, so for that reason I consulted my advocate.
Fit a waste of money. I could have told you for nothing you'd never see hiding her hair of her again. She never wanted that bairn in the first place.
My advocate was wonderful. Not only did he manage to convince the courts to leave the boy with me, he also succeeded in tracing Bella and getting her to sign adoption papers. Jamie was legally mine. Now, I know that wasn't the name that Bella had given him. She had called him Lawrence. But what sort of name is that for a wee one, I ask you? So, I decided to call him Jamie. It's a name I've always been fond of. 2 weeks ago came the time for Jamie to get all dressed up for the first time, in his grey shorts and his grey pullover and his Drumorty school tie. Oh, it was a proud day for both of us as I walked him along to the school. Now, I'll admit on that first morning I got some very strange looks from a host of lassies less than half my age, seeing their wee ones off to the school. But gradually they've gotten used to the sight of me. My favourite time of day is 3 o'clock, when I go and collect him and we walk home together, his warm hand in mine, and he chatters about all that's happened that day. And then we get into the house and he gets into his comfy clothes without having to be asked, collects his jam piece and his glass of milk and climbs onto my knee. "Tell me a story, Mum," he says. "Are there any more perfect words in the whole of the English language than those? Tell me a story, Mum."
Hovans na hovano, hovans na hihoro, hovans na hovano, smishelium ovorak, kaleno cantuk milway, in mo voren hoed mi boy, skussen kade bishin way, modi bi mo vorak. Hovans na hovano, hovans na hihoro, hovans na hovano, smishelium ovorak. Toki mishe damograch, bohen bekli tut me krach, Lundeken en shots nam flan, osim bimbo bora. Horos na hovano, horos na hihoro, hovans na hovano, smishelium ovora. Hovans na hovano, hovans na hihoro, hovans na hovano, smishelium ovorak.
This is an insert for Jock doing Doric eyes. Oh. Mächtig,